Silly Saison.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. I have got one here today from sunny Belgium, and it is the Silly Saison. Now, I haven't reviewed a Saison for, well, it must be over a year now. Well, not far off a year anyway. And it's one of them strange beer styles that has come about and has been a traditional style of beer in Belgium and France. And all of a sudden it's become trendy with the craft brewers, and they've sort of revived this style and it's becoming more popular. And it's quite an interesting style. I will get onto the brewery in a minute. I just want to quickly run over what Saison is, its roots, its traditions, and where it is now. Excuse my hands, they're covered in paint at the moment. I was working out on the studio doing some painting on the outside and I'm absolutely covered in the shit. But this is quite an old brewery that has taken up that mantle of brewing Saison. But Saison goes back even further than the start of this brewery. This brewery was founded in 1850, but Saison goes even further back from there. And it's traditional in certain parts of France, but mainly Belgium, the Walloon or Wallonia part of Belgium, the Hainaut region, where they are the French-speaking part of Belgium. And what it is basically farmers' homebrew. Now, that sounds like a bit of a throwaway statement, but it was originally brewed for the farm workers during the summer months when they were harvesting the crops that had been grown in the farm. But this was usually brewed in winter, and the reason it was brewed in winter is because obviously this was the days before refrigeration, etc. So, and the farm would have been quiet at the time as well. I wouldn't say not much activity, but less activity, and the brewing of this stuff would keep the farmhands busy. And basically what it was a drink that was brewed for the farmhands, low ABV, brewed in winter, and it would be served up in summer as a refreshing drink during the day while they were working, the farmhands were working on the farm. The thing with this style of beer is there is no set rule for it, and the reason for that is it varied from farm to farm, because farmers would brew their own stuff. I mean, they all knew how to brew beer by then, and they would put produce from the farm, i.e. malt, sometimes wheat, but various adjuncts into the beer. Hops as well, because hops of course are a preservative, but they would put that into the beer in varying degrees. Usually the malt would be dark. They didn't really go in for the pale malts, the Pilsner malts, etc. It was basically what was on the farm. So usually it would be dark or darker amber colour. But that's as far as the similarity goes, because, as I say, the farmers weren't brewing to a specific recipe. They were putting their own twists on it, adding their own adjuncts, and it was effectively homebrew for the farmhands. Then around, I would say, well, what would that be? Then around the sort of mid-1800s, you'd have had the style emerging. Certain trends would happen. One of the trends was there would be a lot of wild fermentation, or spontaneous fermentation as it's known, because the beer would be stored in porous wooden barrels, and bacteria that was in the air would get in, and it would give it a slightly sour note to it. Now, of course, sour beer in Belgium is not unusual at all. In fact, they make a big thing about brewing beer with wild yeasts and spontaneous fermentation, etc., which basically means the stuff that's in the air, and there is yeast in the air, and we're all breathing it in and out, etc., and it's multiplying and it varies from one region to another. Different strains of yeast will give you different flavours. So it really is a mishmash. And where there are rules for most styles of beers with Saison, I wouldn't say anything goes, but there are certain trends. But it's still classed as a beer. And it's one of them beers that, again, as I say, it has gained popularity, what with the craft beer range. And this style has become quite popular in America. They're basing their yeast strains on the DuPont, Brasserie DuPont, who also do a Saison as well. And that's where they've copied the style from. And it's popular. And it's popular over here. There's a lot of craft brewers that are brewing Saison over here. Over here now, and even with this lot as well, with the Silly Brewery, fucking name, I'll get onto that in a minute. The ABV is higher. Usually it would be around 2 to 3%. And the reason, well, traditionally it would be 2 to 3%. And the reason for that is you don't want pissed up farmhands who are operating machinery or dangerous equipment getting lashed up and then going out and going on a fucking mad spree on a tractor or a combine harvester or even a plough, a horse with a plough. So there you go, that's how that works. The brewery, that gets its name from the region that they come from. The region is called Scilly, right? Now I know it sounds silly, but the reason it's called Scilly, it's from the, I think there's a brook or a river there, and it's called the Seal, and it's S-I-L-L-E, and the name derives from there. I think in Flemish it's called the Zuil or something, Z-U-I-L-L-E, I think that's how it's pronounced. Please don't quote me on that though, my Flemish is absolutely diabolical. But that's where we are. But as I say, they've been going since 1850. They're a family-run brewery. They are now on the 6th generation of the family that's been running the brewery. And they've also got another label. I don't know whether they amalgamated or whether they got taken over, but they also have another label or another brand of beer that they release, and it's called the Engheim label, and they do various beers, various traditional style beers, and they're linked to this lot. And of course this brewery do all the traditional Belgian styles. They do triples, doubles, Saison, etc., Christmas beer, and they obviously do the Engheim stuff as I've just mentioned. So there you go. So finally, let's open it up and let's see what's going on. Right, before we do, I'll just give you a quick rundown of what it is. As I said, it's a Saison, as if you didn't know. It is 5%. It is all in French. And I'm actually learning German at the moment because I'm fed up trying to fucking pronounce words that I'm absolutely butchering, only for some subscriber to correct me. So I am actually trying to learn German at the moment, not French, no point. But this is all in French and it's not really giving me much indication of the ingredients. There's no brew sheet on the website. Oh, there is, and I tell a big fat whopping lie. Water, barley malt, hops and yeast. That's quite conservative for a Saison. Normally they would contain other adjuncts as well. But let's open it up and let's see what it tastes like. Now, as I say, I haven't had a Saison in donkeys, and I think the last one I had, I think I bought it from Marks and Spencer. It was from a British craft brewer. That's how long ago it was. But I'd like to revisit the style. I keep seeing Saison, and I don't know what it is. There's something in my head. I'll tell you exactly what it was. There's a French beer label called La Goudale. That's sort of like a farmhouse beer. What do they call it? The Bière de Garde. That's a similar style. Bière de Garde is like a French farmer's home brew, similar to Saison, same sort of principle, but they throw in all kinds of nonsense in there. There's the cap. So that's what's put me off trying Saison, but I saw this the other day and I thought I'm going to give this a go. I see they've got that La Goudale in Morrison's at the moment. I'm not going to try that. I thought it was absolutely crap. But there you go. Now there's the colour. Now that is a traditional Saison colour. They were usually dark. If you buy a Saison now, a lot of them, in fact the majority of them, they use light coloured malt, which, because there's no real rules to Saison, I'm not going to say they're doing it wrong, but the traditional way, because they didn't have the abundance of pale malts like they have now, they used to use these sort of amber coloured malts. They'd roast them and they'd turn out like that. So there it is in the glass. The glass that you're supposed to use for this, I think anything goes as well. It's a very loose style of beer. There's no real strict rules, so anarchy reigns and anything goes basically. What are we getting on the nose? Very malty. Some clove. The aromas are not big, but if I was blindfolded, I would say that it did have the aroma of a Belgian blonde, but it's a weak aroma. It's not strong at all. Quite malty though. There's a sweetness to it. It's malty. It smells like roasted malt. Almost like toffee malt. Almost like caramel malt, I should say, not toffee. Yeah, it's like a caramel malt. I don't know whether it's my nostrils deceiving me, but I am getting a faint whiff of ethanol, and at 5%, I'd be surprised if it really is ethanol. There was a little touch of spice on there as well. It's like clove and pepper. That's what I'm getting. But not a lot to go on. Or actually, I'm getting some hoppy notes on there now too. Like herbal hops with a slight bitterness. Interesting. Let's see what it's like on the palate. Bottoms up. Well, that's different and interesting. There is a huge malty finish on this, like a biscuit malt, would you believe? And it's putting me in mind of a bitter. There is some hot bitterness on that, but there's a huge malt finish, huge biscuit malt finish, which is interesting. It's definitely not what I would be expecting from a Belgian beer. Let me dive in again. There's a fair bit of clove in there. Clove and biscuit malt are the two big things I'm getting at the moment. That finish though, wow, it lasts a long time. And it's nice, you can tell that the malts that they've used in this, they're good quality malts, I will say that. That's a cross between a really good English ale with them malts and a Belgian beer with the clove notes to it. And I quite like it. In fact, I like it a lot. It's very nice. There's some hot bitterness on there, definitely getting some of that. Not big, but it is there. And there is some sweetness to it as well. And I'm sure there's invert sugar in this, candy sugar. It's quite carbonated, the head retention is quite good. But it's it's got that sweetness to it, and it's got the clove, which is the... It's got the sweetness to it, and it's got the clove, and that's the Belgian part of the deal. And then the malt, to me, it's quite big, and it puts a very, in my opinion, and from my taste, it puts a very British stamp on it, because you don't normally get malt that's as big in Belgian beers. Not normally anyway. There are exceptions, of course, in certain doubles and quadruples, but this really does have an emphasis on the malt. And it's nice. And that biscuit malt finish at the end, it's lovely. There's no sourness to that. I'm not really picking up any notable sourness. I wasn't sure whether there was meant to be any or not, or in fact whether they've used any spontaneous fermentation on this, or wild fermentation, whatever you want to call it. But it ain't bad, I have to say. What's the verdict on Silly Saison? Well, this has been sat in the fridge for quite a long time, and I was putting it off because there was other beers in there that I thought I'd rather check out. But again, this normally happens to me when I leave a beer laying in the fridge because I don't like the look of it. I try it and it's generally quite good. And this isn't bad, believe me. I had mixed thoughts about buying Saison. I really wasn't too sure about it, and I know the reason why. It was because I was put off by that Lagudale. Now, as I say, the rules on brewing Saison, it's based on French farmers' homebrew, which varied from farm to farm, not just region to region. It could be the farm next door could be brewing something completely different to you, different ingredients, different amount of hops. There was absolutely no consistency whatsoever, so basically anything went. But I think what Silly have done here is they've honed on a good recipe, and it mixes, in my opinion, the good elements of British beer and the good elements of Belgian beer. Now, why do I come to that conclusion? Well, the malt on this is huge, and it leaves a really nice biscuit malt finish. A really good one, I have to say. That is a really nice and long finish as well. But then you've got the Belgian style that is predominant on the palate, and that is the candy sugar and the clove as well, which you'd only really find in Belgian style beers. And again, that comes from the yeast and the sugar, the sweetness on it. Carbonation's nice, mouthfeel is nice. The body on this is really big, and there's no wheat in there according to the ingredients. I don't know how true that is and what they put on the ingredients, but the body on this is really nice. It's very full-bodied, and I like it. And I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10 because it's a really nice beer. It's a good ABV. I could probably session a few of these actually, because it's 5%, so it's not too bad. But the malt on this is quite moreish. Not so much on the palate, but when you get that nice biscuit malt finish at the end, you think, oh yeah, this is good. And that's exactly what I'm thinking. So yeah, that's a worthy 8 out of 10. I'm going to try some more Saison on the strength of that, because, as I say, I really didn't like the style, but that's renewed my faith in it. And DuPont, apparently, Brasserie DuPont, do a really good Saison as well. This stuff I've seen about a lot. You can get it on Beers of Europe, you can get it on all the good Belgian online retailers, etc. So it's not that difficult to get hold of. If you like Belgian beer and you like your traditional British beers, you're going to like that, because the malt gives it the British and the Belgian style beer comes out on top with the clove and the candy sugar. So yeah, I'd say give it a go. It's really nice. 8 out of 10, recommended. And remember, beer is working class champagne.